大家早 Welcome, good morning everyone. This is Jake Fu at Houston, Texas with Edge Radio Asian Global Now. 大家观众好，我叫傅凯，今天又到我们亚洲生活在美国。今天我请到的特别来宾是 Mr. Han Zhu。Yes, welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, today we're going to talk to him about his life and what's like in America. 今天请到朱先生跟我们谈一下他在美国的生活，非常非常的精彩。Yeah, okay. Well, Mr. Han, that's yours. Everybody call you that.
Right.
Which is I met you a little while ago. You talked to me about very exciting things in your life. But we'll do one thing at a time first. Tell us a little about yourself. Where you grow up, and are you grew up in Texas, Houston, or?
Well, I grew up for the first 3 years in New York. I was born in New York.
Okay.
And when I was there, then when I grew up in New York, my parents, they told us, hey, we need to move to Texas. and of course, yeah, being 3 years old, there's not much you can say.
Right.
My mama said, we're leaving. So I said, no, we're not. I was I was having a great time living, staying in the basket, watching the snow fall, catching it whatever you can. And I said, I'm not going. And my father said, no problem, you stay here. I said, Daddy, what about my food? And he said, well, that's your problem. So I jumped in the car with everybody else. There was 4 of us at that time.
Oh.
So we got in the car. My father traded his Nikon camera. He paid $600 for his Nikon for an old Buick.
Okay.
And then he came down to Texas.
Oh, let me tell everybody. Well, 朱先生小的时候，他是3岁的时候就在纽约长大的。那个时候，他父母亲说我们要搬到德州去了。他那时候很小，他就坐在他的这些小宝宝车子里面。他说我不要去。他爸爸说，他妈妈可以说，你可以留下来没关系。他爸爸说你也可以留下来没有关系，但是我们要离开，所以他没有办法再跟他一起去。他的爸爸用他当时一个照相机 Nikon， right， 也600块钱跟人家交换了买一部汽车，所以就开车到德州来了。Quite an adventure of 4 people， 一家4口就来到德州。Yeah.
So the first part of my life, I would say I was Chinese. The reason being, the only language I spoke was Chinese. It's called Thai Sanhua.
Thai Sanhua.
Okay.
Yeah.
So up to the first grade, I only spoke Chinese.
Oh.
And when I went to school, the teacher was doing this, and I didn't know what she was saying. 2 months later, I found out what she wanted. Do not spit on the floor.
Oh.
And the problem is that, your first language, you spoke Chinese at home all the time, so you're Chinese. Then from then on out, I realized, hey, I needed to learn the language. And then from there forward, that was what happened.
Oh. 我在刚刚移到德州的时候，他还很小，然后后来就上小学1年级的时候，他那个时候讲的是台山话，没有讲很多的英文，所以那个时候的话，老师每天就要手指着他，他说这什么意思？他2个月以后他才了解。那个老师说，请你不要在地上吐痰，因为的话是个很不好的习惯。之后的话，他就觉得我应该要跟人家怎么样沟通，一定要把这语言学会，他就开始学习英文了。So that's interesting.
Well, it's you can imagine some of these youngsters. They're new to the society. They want to please, especially they want to please their parents, also please the teachers. Then from then on, I realized, I needed to change. So I learned how to speak, and also I learned how to debate.
Oh,
so I debated in high school. I debated in college, and needless to say, when I graduated from college, I came back to teach debate.
Oh, well, 他小的时候开始学的英文，他觉得英文是一个非常重要的语言。当然，在美国生活一定要学英文啦。然后他就对上面特别感兴趣，他就开始参加我们所谓的座谈辩论会。他从小学、初中到大学，大学毕业之后，他又回到德州，就开始教各种不同的学生跟这个辩论这一方面的才分跟这边的学问还有课程。Well, debate. You actually there's a class you can teach you how to do that? I didn't know that.
Well, yes, they have debate classes. And, actually, I was certified as a English teacher as well as a speech and debate coach.
I see.
In fact, I went to the University of Texas with the intention of going to law school. But I thought for a while there because they had that program whereby you can go for 3 years and then 2 years of law school. So I said, well, okay, if I did that, what happened if I didn't finish?
Right.
So that was a problem. So I thought I'll just go ahead and go an extra year to get a 4-year degree, and then from there I could go do something else, like for example, to teach.
Are you still going to do the law school in 4 years?
Well, here's what happened. When I did go to, when I graduated from the University of Texas, then I came down to Houston, and I went to law school, South Texas College of Law.
Okay.
But during that time, we need to realize, we were in turmoil. There was the Vietnam War going on at that time.
I see. We'll hold it right there.
Okay.
So Mr. Han went to university, and he really liked debate, and he said, well, it's a possibility he maybe成为一个律师。他上4年大，在美国有个新的学，就是你假如上3年大学、2年大学可以，然后修5年的话，你可以去读那个，就是说我们的律师事务所这一方律师法律这一方面，所以在考虑这4年你要把它读完之后的话，我觉得要做什么，他在考虑之中，所以他最后决定怎么样去做它。It's a pretty complicated process, right? To decide what you want to do.
In life,
well, let me ask you first.
Go ahead.
How did you choose debating? 另外他有拿到的就是教英文老师的文凭，所以他可以教英文，所以他的英文非常的好，所以可以做这些辩论会的话，当然要英文了解得很深刻啦，所以才能做很好的辩谈。Yeah. 所以 when you decide to become a debate, what did make you thinking this is your lifelong goal? Being an English teacher, we understand that, but debating is something like, are you going to make money off debating?
Well, that being true, it's true. Everyone realizes there are benefits of it, but like you say, how can we turn this into money? When I went to the University of Texas, at that time they had this school called the Walter Cronkite School of Communications.
Right.
There were 4 schools there. There was radio, television, journalism, advertising, and the School of Speech.
OK， 他说那个时候美国已经很有名一个电视叫做 Walter Cronkite， 大家也听过，这是很有名的电视节目主持人。那个时候学校分成4种不同，一个就是说专门讲辩论这一方面，一方面的话是讲这个communication， 然后还有一个很重要就是说，好像我们可以讲说这个广告 ，OK， 然后 business 这一方面，所以有各种4种不同的方面 ，So you decide to go to number 4.
Well, I was in the School of Speech already.
Okay, School of Speech.
Right, but they were changing. The School of Speech was changing from a Bachelor of Arts over to a Bachelor of Science. In other words, they would have 2 degrees. One was a BA and one was a BS. So in a BS school, then we had to take extra courses like statistics and evaluation. So at the end of the time, when it came time to go, there were 22 of us in that class. And I was the only one that actually got a certificate. So I was the #1 BSer from the University of Texas.
Bachelor of Science.
Bachelor of Science.
他说学校改组，所以他们现在变成BS 跟 BA, you're a Bachelor of Arts, right?
Well, it was a Bachelor of Arts in the past, but then it turned into a BS as well.
他们把这变成 Bachelor of Science， 就是从科学技术这一方面有关系的那个学位，所以他有学士学位的话，他是第一个拿到，就是 Bachelor of Science. Well, that is quite interesting. 那时候有22个学生改变，很有意思。Yeah. So it's the same thing, so right?
It was the same except for extra courses, 2 extra courses.
Okay. 才可以多选2个课程，就可以 Bachelor of Science.
So when I tell my students, I was the #1 graduate, they were amused and say, "Hey, that's pretty good." I said, "Not really. I was the only one that graduated." So sometimes, you have to believe that I'm the #1 BSer at the University of Texas.
Okay. 所以他说，你讲的我们英文有句话，毕业就是说好像一个人就做胡说八道。就是说，但是他是第一个拿到 Bachelor of Science， 所以有时候很多人问他，你这个学位很特别啊，全校只有你一个人第一个拿到，你就是他说是啊，我就是胡说八道就把这个学位就拿来了，就说 BS degree， 所以很有意思。What's that degree? You can teach?
I can teach, and also I went back to get a certificate in English, teaching English too.
Okay.
But after I got my first job, I started working, and like I was telling some people earlier, back then we had discipline whereby, you could spank the students and keep them in line, whatever. But as a consequence of that, we were able to watch the students, make sure they were doing what they needed to do. it was the war time at that time. You know, the Vietnam situation,
Okay.
and a lot of the people who were involved in that situation, they would have to say, okay, am I going to go to war, or am I going to stay and try to do something whereby I can be more beneficial? So in my case, I had 3 reasons not to go to war.
OK， 那么讲，他说，当他成为一个老师，另外在修的学分得到那个就是说文学学位，所以才可以教课。在那教学生的时候，有一个很特别的时间，因为那正好在越南战争，所以那个时候你可以从军，另外就可以上大学。在大学里面有各种不同的选择，在这选择的时候，他们要决定你这个学位要拿来做什么。Yeah. So the choice is to go to college. And what are you going to do with the degree?
Well,
right?
Yes, but the 3 choices I had was obviously I was going to law school at that time.
Okay.
And then also I got married and I was teaching. So those were the 3 reasons that kept me out of the draft.
Oh,
and even if I got the draft, my number was 300. So they would have to decimate all the male population before they come to me.
他那个时候因为是美国征兵制度嘛，但他没有征到他，因为第一他现在结了婚，第二的话他在大学里面学法律，第三的话他现在也在学校学习就是学习这个教课，所以的话没有征到。他说那时候排名呢都是300个，他说前面的300人大概全部没有希望了才会轮到他，所以找到他的机会非常的小，所以觉得非常感到很好的很运气。So by the time the draft was mandatory, right? Not volunteer.
Right. It was mandatory. The draft, you know, you would have to go sign up. And a lot of kids didn't want to go, so they moved to Canada. But as a consequence of that, things changed. Back then, we had like I mentioned, very strict discipline. In fact, some of the things I regretted was the fact I had to spank the children.
他那时候教学校的时候，学校老师可以把学校的学生管得比较严一点，可以打学生的那个时候。不像现在比较开放，那个时候比较严格，所以就感觉上不一样。So, how many students did you teach at time?
At that time or altogether?
Altogether, you think?
Altogether, probably about 5,000 students.
Wow! In how many years?
Well, you got to remember, I started in '67.
Okay.
I started.
But during the Vietnam War, how many students did you see at the time?
Well, it was normally you would have about 30 kids in the classroom. Okay. And then you have 5 classes.
I see.
So about 100, 150 students.
这是早期教课大概150个学生，每一堂课是30个学生。大家不要走 ，A single over now。大家千万快，我们又回到我们今天的节目了。我们现在跟Mr. Han 讲一下他在美国生活，他是一个美国的老师，他学习在教课的这些过程中，跟这些学生有什么跟现在有什么不一样？ Well, welcome back. We're going to talk about Mr. Han. Because he is actually a professional school teacher, that's what his profession. And early days, so he will talk about what was his experience like in America teaching the student and today. So I'm going to ask him some very tricky questions, so don't go away. So Mr. Han, well back then you were telling me teaching students, you can have a little more disciplinary to them. Okay, today is different. So what do you think what it changed?
There isn't really that much that has changed in terms of the system itself. You have to be able to have compassion. If we look at the school system from one point of view and another point of view, then we can decide, you know, which one we want to pick up. For example, the educational system in the past, if you look at all the books, will show you every time you go to class, you see a female figure there. And it was very seldom you would see a male in that mix over there. And what happened was that when the females went to college, they went with the expectation of meeting someone, and should they find a mate, they would say, okay, will we get married? And the female would go out and pursue a educational, you know, she would go out and teach for a while. When she teaches for a while, then if the husband goes somewhere else or is transferred somewhere else, she has to follow him, or she would follow him.
Right.
So that usually led to a 4-year stint for her inside of the school system, so they would have that constant turnover. For those that stayed, well, it's a different story. Now, what the school system, especially the Texas Educational Agency,
OK， 我问了个做法 ，OK，let me explain 这个。所以在那个时候的话，教育的话多半是以女性作为教育这方面比较多，因为她假如结了婚的话，因为那时候 早期的美国女性或世界性女性都是希望能够找到很好的家庭为主的先生这一方面，所以假如她学教育的话，她可以成为一个老师。然后假如她的先生结了婚之后要因为工作关系或要移到别的处的话，这个对她来讲的话，老师工作是一个比较容易可以接受还继续过去教下去，因为学校到处都是，她只要有很好的文凭的话，她可以转到另外一个城市就可以继续做老师，等于一个副业，对她的先生非常的方便。接着来讲，他说德州的那个就是说我们的教育这个文化方面有些改革。So Texas, you talk about they changed the education system to from what to what?
Well, what they had was that they wanted to keep the teachers there to have some sort of continuity, keep them there all the time. And then, of course, if you can keep the teachers and the school system, they would be able to see the kids and say, hey, I taught your mother, I taught your father, and impose some sort of discipline on the youngsters.
I see.
But what happened was, because they were moving every 4 years, the teachers were moving every 4 years, they lost that continuity. Then the Texas educational system eventually said, okay, you are vested in a pension program as a teacher, but if you leave, you would lose that pension plan. So that kept the teachers there for a longer period of time.
他说德州的法律，因为他们往往是说老师在学校教课，教到小孩子之后，小孩子长大，然后的话，他是教他们的下一代，对下一代说，好像这个老师是从以前是教过我的，以前去上他的课，有一种好像很好的这种传统性的。但是大家因为活动性改变的很大，所以的话，他那个政府就说，假如你留下来的话，我会给你一个好像有个很好的就是好像退休金这一方面的保障。假如你离开的话，你就没有这个福利。所以对他们来讲呢，留在一个地方，从一个地方教课的话，时间越长，对他们退休的福利性更好。就是德州希望他们老师留下来，保持在一个区域里面，对他们来讲的话，不会有这么大的流动性，对教育方面比较方便。对啊，很好。Very good. So, well, that's not for the teacher part. We want to talk about the student. So, what's the difference between back then and today? You say back then you can
Spank
the kids.
Right.
Today you can't even talk to them too harshly, you know?
I have to say this for the female teachers. The female teachers are a little bit more compassionate.
I see.
You will notice if you're in high school, there are very few male influences. If anything, it's a gym coach, the principal, the vice principal, the science teacher.
I see. 他是说在学校里面的话，多半就是女性的老师比较多，因为女性的老师同情心还有了解性比较强，所以在一个学校里面，多半你看到男性的这一方面老师比较多半是好像是教练、校长、副校长，或者学科学，这教这些科学、物理、化学这方面老师也是男性。So is that designed that way? Have more female teacher in school?
Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that obviously the females, you got to understand the time. The time was the country was developing. And because the country was developing, they needed more engineers, they needed more professors and teachers.
Okay.
Male-dominated industries where the females were not trained to be in those industries. So as a consequence of that, then most of the males would go out into these fields, and then there were others. You know, like in my case, there were only one speech teacher in every school, and usually it would be a male. Maybe sometimes a female. And in doing so, the teachers would take, you know, back then we could teach several speech classes, but most of the classes was in English as well.
它是一个就是说教 speech 就叫论坛跟讲话，就是说教导这一方面的课程，每一个学校只有一个讲这一方面的课程，所以有时候教不同的课。然后他是说的话，那个时候社会在建设之中，所以的话很多的工作都是以男性化为主，所以女性做老师的就比较多，因为很多都是这些建设啊，或者是科学啊，或者这一方面的话，男性化的工作比较多，女性比较少，所以就业方面的话，不像现在也好像比较男女均等，那个时候比较男性化重视，所以学校老师的话，很多人就就业成为老师是一个比较好的职业，所以的话就是一种选择，因为社会的改变。现在的话当然跟以前有点不太一样啦，所以的话 OK, so there's more female teacher and So you think so the female teacher allowed to discipline the kids?
Yeah, teachers had to do what they had to do, but when I say spanking, it was only because of the last situation. Usually the males would spank the boys, and then of course if the females, we would send them to the office.
I see.
I remember one youngster who was a Chinese student, one of my Chinese students, and of course I said to the class, I want everybody to bring their homework to class. And then, of course, this kid was doing something, he was working at home. He was working in a grocery store, and he didn't have time to do his homework. So then I called him up, and I said, do you have your homework? He said, no, sir. So I had to take him outside and spank him. I felt real bad about that because eventually this kid worked hard, and what he did was that he became the PUC chairman, in the state of Texas. And then eventually he moved up to the Bill Clinton administration, became the undersecretary.
Wow.
So every time,
okay, we'll have to stop there.
All right.
Okay, 他说有一个像例子里面的话，像男老师多半就好像对于学生可以好像惩罚，然后女老师多半把学生就上到就是说校长室去让他们说你们做错事情。他有一个学生有个例子的话，他是一个东方性的就是华裔，但他平常在家里要帮父母亲卖水仙啊，就是说做食物这一方面的工作，所以他有的时候功课就没做完，没有做完到学校当老师就会很生气啦，就要对他有所惩罚。但这个学生非常的努力，后来的话就慢慢他事业做得很好，他做到美国总统Bill Clinton手下的一部分啊，所以的话有的时候往往这个生活教育上面有很大的转变，看一个人的想法跟做法，他是个非常努力的人，对他来讲的话。往往有些很特别的例子跟情况之下，会有很多不同的未来。所以 So you were saying he is a Bill Clinton what secretary?
Well, he was the undersecretary in the Department of Energy.
Okay, 他成为一个Bill Clinton 手下专门就是能源这一方面的一个秘书长，做这一方面的研究跟试数。So, well, that is very impressive.
Well, these days when I call him up, I said, "How you been doing?"
里面都有 copper wire 嘛，是导电的，所以当你戴在身上的话，可以给你人身体上面的，就是人本身不是发电厂吗？就会发生了很特别的这种磁场作用，所以可以保护你，不容易生病，可以杀菌。Wow, thank you for the bracelet. 我还有 protection 的，受到保护啦，转个银色圈，它就很简单，一个习的做一个圈圈。So, and I must thank you for the gift.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, this is so cool. So I'm going to tell my friend about. Yeah. So you say your hospital now doing it too? They're making copper?
They're doing copper. Many of the doctors have pins that are copper coated and so on and so forth. So they're beginning to believe in some of these things. There are other things that I deal with too, like for example, exercise is very important. So I swim a lot, I play ping pong a lot, and I teach Tai Chi. So that way it keeps me young. Hopefully I'll be able
to... 朱先生今年已经70 How old are you?
77.
77岁。他说，对这个人的生活长命的秘诀是：第一，要保持时常的，就是说呢，锻炼身体的锻炼。Yeah, and 还有what else you do besides exercising?
Well, besides exercising, I talk a lot.
Oh, 他说
right.
Yeah.
So I was the #1 BSer from my school.
他说，跟人与人之间多谈论。集会是生活里面非常重要的一点，所以让人可以长命百岁。Yeah, and you were talking about something else. You will tell me longevity besides exercise and socializing. What else was?
Well, longevity is that you have to have constant communication with
communication.
It's one of the top ideas. I mean, you can stop smoking. You can do a lot of things that normally you should be doing.
Yeah.
But one of the highest things that you really have is that you have to have some sort of social interaction with people. Even now with the pandemic being what it is, it's causing a lot of problems. People, like they say, they are getting too nervous. They're too,
right.
So the social interaction really is not going on.
主持人跟我们讲，现在我们的生活有很大的改变，因为传染病 COVID-19， 所以很多人都单独住在家里。但是对于一个要生活要长命百岁来讲的话，人与人之间的交际跟活动是非常的重要的，因为让人的活着有一个目的，有一个目标，可以大家合着在一起讲话。把人单独隔离起来的话，对人的身心方面的思考跟健康就有很大的伤害。所以他建议大家，就是你在家里的话， 也不要忘记跟朋友打电话呀，保持这些生活上的联系，对身体的心理的作用非常的重要。So 我们要讲一下朱先生，他是 You are the communication expert. I noticed that. So you actually teaching classes for communication?
I have 3 areas that I teach.
Okay.
One is English.
Okay, 有3方面，他教英文
Then the other one would be communication skills.
Okay.
And the third one is speech and debate.
第二个就是说交流，第三个话就是 debate， 就是辩论这一方面的才干，怎么样的训练能够更好。So the debate usually work with lawyers and who else you need?
Well, no, not what it is. Obviously, I teach in high school.
Right.
Okay.
So
and then I taught other classes in China, but that's besides the point. What it is the basic fundamentals. You think about the basic concept of communication, and we always think about the sound that comes out of our mouth.
Yeah.
Okay. But then in that aspect, there are other things too. Like, for example, the nonverbal aspect of communicating.
Okay.
You know, like we were talking about earlier. A man meets a girl, and he tells the young lady, I love you so much. They're sending 2 messages. I really have to force myself to say this, but I say the words. So the sounds come out, but the nonverbal communication says another thing.
他说在我们这个互相人之间交的时候，有时候语言上面会有各种不同的做法。表面上说我爱你，但是表情跟我的心理生态的表现，好像说我必须这样子说，才能表现我对你的情意。那好像这就跟你心里最真正想要讲的话，好像并不是很真诚的感觉，因为你的身体在这种无意就潜意识下面 unconscious 表现出来，并不是好像非常的诚恳。所以有2种不同的沟通的方法 communication， 往往你不能不知不觉你就会表现出来，所以是非常的重要，需要这方面的指导。所以他这方面的专家很有意思。
The communication is a two-way process. Actually, you got to understand. Basically, it consists of a sender, a message, and a receiver. Those are the 3.
他说 communication 是 like 个双线道，来去，你来我去，分成3个部分。So what's the first one? Sender 就是说发言人
the message
这个里面所要讲的这个事情怎么样跟他了解 ，OK？
And then a receiver
接收人 ，OK？ 所以你发言人、接收人中间是他们的 message， 就是他们的所谓传言这些话所做的事情。So the 3
three elements. Okay. So the sender, he is sending an oral sound over.
Okay. 讲话的时候声音发过去。
But at the same token, he is also sending a non-verbal signal over through the message.
跟他讲话之间的话，在无形之中、潜意识下面也会表现一种不同的沟通。
And also the receiver, the one who receives the message.
接收人
So that receiver is listening to the sound and looking at the non-verbal. Okay? And then he incorporates that into the message to determine how he would react to it.
他说，当你发言给这个接收人，接收人这时候他会看到你讲的话的声音，但你在表情或者是身体方面各种潜意识的表现，他会接受有种各种不同的反应，他会觉得你说你今天跟我讲的话，我听到你跟我讲，但你的身体里面无形之中给我另外，然后我要决定就接收人，我要不要接受他给我的这个讲的这个事情或者是发的这个言行这一方面的规则，所以他说，that's quite a science, right?
It's a science. It's a concept. That's why it's circles. Now you got the sender, message, receiver. The receiver then digests the information. Then he becomes the sender with a different message to the receiver, the original receiver. So that circle constantly goes around.
然后又回来，就是说接到这个对方，我跟你讲话，然后那个对方接着他又会反应回来，跟这个发言人又是成为一个叫圆形的 circle， 又混转回来，所以的话，这中间有很大的来往的沟通。So when you tell the kids the best way, you say you're supposed to be like whisper.
Well, here you got that cycle going, right? Now, the sender sends a message to the receiver. The receiver then becomes the sender. And if in the sending process that he has now changed to, you can tell by the tone of his voice. Also, whether he's paying attention or not, by taking that information and sending it back to you, to the new receiver. So it's a constant circle.
发言人成为一个接收员，因为他回来的时候反应过来就接收他的反应。So what's the best way to talk to kids? We don't more effective. 哪一种方法对小孩子比较有效用？我们讲不吼叫他们的话，他们做错的事情，哪一个方法对他们更有好的效果？
The best, in my opinion, this is my opinion, the best way to communicate is try to understand their point of view. Their point of view, because he will send you the signals back in his message to you. So once you understand his point of view, you then become compassionate to his point of view, which then starts the communication process.
他说，当一个发言人给那讲话，第一要注意同情心，要他了解，假如你跟他讲的话，也了解他的反应会是怎么样，他的心理跟情况如何。假如他那个了解的话，这才会成为100%的沟通。不然的话，你只是讲，他听，并没有真正可以接受，因为你没有了解在他的心态跟环境之下，所以要完全的沟通，要互相要很彻底的了解，才会有很有效用的沟通方法。Yeah, like a boss to employees, students, the teachers, and parents to the kids.
Even this system that we have set up right here, we're saying something, we're sending a message out. If we don't pay attention to our audience, and our audience says, "I lost you,"
I see.
Then the purpose of what you're trying to do.
So you was in the better to say whispering to them.
Well,
very low volume.
Yes, you have to go into their point of view. If there's a little youngster, you play with them. If it's a big, vast audience, you got to be able to entertain them.
I see. 但是要看这个情况。假如你是个小小的小孩子跟他讲的话，你应该怎么样沟通，或者是很多的观众在那里，怎么样让这些观众觉得他非常的有，就像 entertainment， 就好像一种娱乐一样的，他就接受的比较快。Oh, that's very good. So we're going to bring you back for more communication. And today we just first time have Mr. Han come to talk to us about all those wonderful things he knew. 接下来我们下次还请朱先生回来跟我们多讲一讲人与人之间的交际沟通这一方面，有很多方面我们真是一下子学习不了这么多，要一步一步来接收，慢慢的来开始。我下次请他来跟我们多讲一点。今天的时间又要到我们的时间快要完了 ，We almost finished. We're going to ask Mr. where we can find you.
I can't even find myself sometimes.
他自己都找不到。Can we get some advice from you or from Facebook?
No problem. Most of the time I use WeChat.
Okay.
WeChat, and also I use my email. And my email address is bchee Chee at Yahoo.
OK， 可以在雅虎上面找到他。大家观众你要知道，亚洲生活在美国是非常重要的一个节目。我们是用bilingual，就是2种语言发的，而且我们讲的是生活在美国的各种不同的状况，然后你可以学到很多的知识。Yeah. Asian Global Now, the reason we are bilingual, we want to helping everybody communicate, like Mr. Han. So really good helping us how to make sure all the people in America are able to communicate with each other. There's a mission our show. So every Monday from 11 to noon, don't forget watching us. Also, you can find us on Facebook, Edge Radio Network, and /Asian Global Now. Don't forget watch other show at Edge Radio Network. We have a lot of show. So today we're going to say goodbye and thank for Mr. Han.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We're going to have him back. 谢谢他今天来我们特别来宾，就是我们特别来宾。下次的话，不要忘记礼拜一早上11点到中午，接下来继续看更精彩的节目。谢谢大家 ，Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, great show. Thank you so much.
All right.